Gentlemen, we are about to move on to our second presentation of the day. Our second presentation comes from Acuutech. Acuutech are with us today alongside their partner Managed Security Solutions. Delighted to have them here. Acuutech are a global leader in Microsoft technology. Acuutech build highly advanced cloud, on-prem and hybrid services that ultimately deliver on their business benefits first approach. And joining us now, we have Terry Story and Philip Moss from Acuutech. Good morning to you, gentlemen.
Good morning, Ben. Thank you so much for having us.
No problem at all. We're delighted to have you here. Terry and Philip are going to be talking us through the question of what is a cloud-first strategy with hybrid cloud. Again, if you want to ask any questions to Terry and Phil, please use the chat facility on the right-hand side of your screen. You can also speak with Acuutech at their booth in the virtual exhibition hall, where they're also offering the chance to win a free cloud readiness assessment. Without further ado, gentlemen, over to you.
Thank you so much. And Ben, first things first, do we have my screen sharing clearly?
We absolutely do.
Perfect, good. So my name is Philip Moss. I'm Chief Product Officer here at Acuutech, and I'm joined by my good friend and colleague here, Terry Story, who is Chief Cloud Officer at Acuutech. And we're going to spend some time today talking about what is a cloud-first strategy and what does that really mean for your organization, and what does it mean for your ongoing IT strategy, especially when using a cloud-first strategy in terms of the broad and powerful Microsoft suite of capabilities. So what does cloud-first really mean? I think of this in three ways. Putting the correct thing in the correct place. In other words, cloud is not about let's go and run everything in Azure or AWS or Google Cloud. It's about recognizing that there are certain workloads that are the correct thing to run in the public cloud, say email services or collaboration platforms. But there are other workloads that are logical to run closer to where our user base are, say a latency intensive database or something where monolithic requirements or legacy capabilities mean it's better running, close to home in an on-prem scenario. So it's about putting your workloads that meet your business needs in the correct location. But it's also about having flexibility. It's about being able to move workloads around easily. It's about to be able to move a workload that might be running on-prem into another location and back again based on, say, growth requirements or scaling requirements to say a particular point in your financial year where more workload is coming in. And last, it's about management and control. It's about looking after your IT estate and your infrastructure in a unified way so we can work with single panes of glass or unified management experiences. We're not heading off to use an internal system for our on-prem management and then heading off to a public cloud portal to look after our public cloud systems. And I really think about those as being the three pillars or the three core parts of a cloud-first strategy. Correct location, flexibility, unified management. Now, the important thing about cloud is it's not a location. It really is about a mindset, and it's about sort of thinking about our IT strategy in a fundamentally different way. And again, Acuutech has been a service provider now for over 25 years, and when we think about building solutions to our customers and with our partners, we think about in the following terms. We all talk about the new normal post-COVID, so let's think about the new IT platform normal. It's about moving over to an OPEX-based model rather than a CAPEX-based model. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the traditional model of buy hardware, run it for 3, 5, 7 years, spend lots of money on consultants, spend lots of money on software, rinse and repeat at some point in the future. It's about moving over to a consumption-based model and critically thinking of our IT platform in terms of services. So not monolithic platforms, but services that empower our business. And we do that by taking advantage of automation and orchestration to make consumption and implementation of those services easier and simpler. And of course, that drives agility and flexibility, both in terms of deployment location, but also speed of deployment. And it's also about taking advantage of these inherent capabilities we have, both with our modern on-prem systems or our edge scenarios, as many of us think about them now, and our public cloud. Take advantage of elastic scale and flexibility. And as I said before, take advantage of that unified management to ultimately create systems that are connected by design. Many of us think about our IT platforms historically as being islands of resource or islands of capability. And this is really about moving forwards to a world where IT platforms are fundamentally connected and integrated end-to-end by design. Now, let's think about that in a little bit more detail, because everyone likes to run around these terms like private cloud, public cloud, hybrid cloud. Let's put some meat on that bone. When I think about these three areas, I think about it as follows. Private cloud or on-prem scenarios is really about giving you infrastructure geographically close to where your users are and dedicated to your organization. So we think of that as being our on-prem IT platforms. When we think about hybrid cloud, we're thinking about services that interconnect between those on-prem or those private cloud experiences and the public cloud. So I think about this as being services that take dependency of the on-prem that might be managed or integrated with the public cloud. Backup is a great example. Disaster recovery would be another good example. But over in the public cloud, we have those services that take no dependency on any local resources. So we have something like, say, email, or a data lake solution, or infrastructure service, right? And ultimately, the public cloud is about consuming service and capabilities on platforms that will be used by other customers. In other words, they are public cloud offerings. And when we think about it in this way, it helps us to understand what is the correct platform to run our workloads for our business, because ultimately, all of us are building IT platforms to serve our organization. We're not building IT platforms for the benefit of our own technical enjoyment, although I'm sure many of us on this call really love the technical engineering activity. I know I do. So, I've spoken conceptually so far. Now let's think about this in the way Microsoft thinks about this story. And I'm going to start with a product that has an odd name, and it's known as Azure Stack HCI. Azure Stack HCI is Microsoft's new breed of edge or on-prem hybrid connected operating system. It is a hyper-converged infrastructure solution, and here's the real power of it. It runs on a range of deployment scenarios. So this isn't an appliance, this isn't some locked out solution, it's based on technologies historically in Windows Server, but this is now available as a new generation of platform. But critically, you can use it to deploy on small edge devices, or deploy it to larger branch offices, say 4 or 6 nodes, or even scales the data center with many, many, many clusters connected together, potentially hundreds of nodes using technological cluster sets. And here's the real value here. That is a platform using technologies you already know. PowerShell, you could manage it via System Center. You can actually manage it using common tools you know from Windows historically. And it works across a wide range of hardware platforms and a wide variety of deployment scenarios. So one investment in technology, multiple capabilities. And remember, there's a large number of hardware vendors and a large number of form factors that are fully supported by this platform. And then, of course, we have Microsoft Azure, the public cloud offering many of us know. But remember, Azure is actually a platform to deliver a really rich set of services. Everything from, say, disaster recovery or backup I've spoken about earlier, through to databases, knowledge management, Bitcoin mining, for example, and similar services. There's a very, very, very wide set of capabilities available on Azure. And the critical thing about the Azure Stack HCI product is it directly integrates with Azure. And notice those arrows are bidirectional. This isn't about simply moving connectivity up into Azure. This is a true bidirectional or hybrid relationship between these fantastic on-prem capabilities or private cloud capabilities and the public cloud Azure. And picking up on this point I opened this session up with, we think about that unified management, and using a set of technologies, broadly speaking, known as Azure Arc, you can now manage both your public cloud and your on-prem or private cloud experiences directly from this unified management experience. And that includes everything from virtual machines, through to databases, through to things like containerization, etc., etc. So there's a very broad set of capabilities. But here's where things get really, really interesting. Yes, that's right. As part of Microsoft's emerging hybrid ecosystem, you can also manage resources inside the third-party clouds. I note AWS and Google Cloud is a good example here. But use the power of Azure Arc and some of the technologies that my colleague Terry is going to talk about later on. You can manage infrastructure and resources inside of these public cloud platforms, including virtual machines and databases. And you can control them from within inside your Azure or your unified Microsoft experience. So that's really powerful because we now finally have a core platform that allows us to work across clouds and across different types of on-prem scenario, all from one integrated platform. And here's the other thing I think is really important. Obviously, this one platform is perfectly happy with workloads. You know, many years ago, I'm sure many of us know that Microsoft was, oh yes, only works Windows and nothing else. Windows, Linux containers, both Windows or Linux containers, are utterly supported by every part of that platform I articulated before. And in fact, Microsoft absolutely considers Linux to be a first-class citizen within its wider portfolio. And I think that's really important because many of us are running heterogeneous platforms. Many of us are running scenarios that have various types of hypervisor or various types of application on various core operating systems. And again, all of those can be run and critically can be managed from this integrated hybrid platform I was articulating for Microsoft. Now, I've given some conceptual stuff. Now let's think about actually what's driving some of the drive towards this cloud-first strategy. So unsurprisingly, there's been a global pandemic I think we've all been aware of recently, and at some point it might end, but we're all getting there, I'm sure. But obviously that's driven a drive to remote working and closing of buildings. That's driven organizations to really need a unified management experience. That's driven organizations to need to consolidate and modernize so that their IT estates can work seamlessly between their on-prem and their public cloud infrastructures. And also it's driven organizations to want to change the way they think about their IT platforms. By, instead of, say, having a rack of servers in the corner of a building, it's about now moving to storing their infrastructure in dedicated co-location facilities or building in high availability and disaster recovery intrinsic in its design. I remember if I go back, 20, 25 years in this industry, we would talk about, a few organizations would have disaster recovery as part of their planning, large banks or similar public sector institutions. They would do things like, they would reserve buildings and have the ability to go to another building in the event of a disaster, and they would copy tapes and things like that. Well, that was 25 years ago. Today, all organizations intrinsically want to think about highly available distributed systems by design, and critically the cost point that is attractive. Now, I've set the scene. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass over to Terry, who's now going to kind of put some more detail on the way the Microsoft value proposition adds into this, and also talk about some of the customer success stories who have taken advantage of this core strategy and have seen value and benefit. So, Terry, over to you, sir.
Thanks, Phil. Can you hear me okay?
We can. All yours.
Thanks, Phil. If we take all aspects covered so far and we frame these through a lens of a customer decision tree, as an example, then we can really start to make sense of all the pieces of the cloud jigsaw and journey opportunities. Now, in its basic form, public cloud is made up of software-defined compute, storage, and networking with many wider services. And on premise, this typically translates to a HCI platform as also software-defined, leveraging very similar software-defined compute, storage, networking, software capabilities. These things combined, you can, on-premise ensure high levels of mobility and compatibility with HCI, or providing platform modernization and software hardware consolidation. Now, in terms of this slide you're seeing in front of us, we're really articulating the different kind of cost performance choices out there. Now, you'll see that we mentioned Azure Stack HCI, we mentioned VMware and Nutanix as the three kind of leading HCI platforms out there today. And Azure Stack HCI being a product in its own right, it's kind of the new kind of HCI, platform out there. It's in its third iteration, but this is a new product in its own right. And really kind of, when you have a customer with a cloud first and Azure directional type outcome, Azure Stack HCI is deriving kind of that kind of hybrid kind of outcome solution. There's a lot of reasons for that. Now, typically in the past, a lot of customers have chosen Hyper-V for cost and performance reasons. But today, this all changes as we bring hybrid cloud services to on-premise through Azure.
Terry, we've lost your audio.
Earlier, and bringing slide disappeared. Okay, it's back again, and And now with that Azure
Terry,
capability.
Terry, so sorry, we lost you for about 15 seconds. You might want to repeat.
Okay. So with Azure Stack HCI and Azure Arc for HCI, we bring Azure on premises. So this really changes the game from a Hyper-V being a cost performance benefit and price point benefit into a true Azure on-premise capable solution, providing the ability to run Azure services, your applications, and projecting your on-premise virtual machine resources into the cloud and managed through a common Azure control plane. So if you press the next key, please, Phil. Now, so in terms of Azure Stack HCI and its Azure capabilities, this now opens up to providing from Azure complete management in terms of VM self-service, multi-site monitoring, and actually now delivering Azure services on-premise through Azure Kubernetes services on HCI, which is another set of services we will talk in a future presentation. But essentially bringing Azure services on-premise in a simplified manner, and in a consistent manner, by only knowing and understanding the Azure capabilities, the Azure portal. Next slide, please, Phil. So Azure Arc for Azure Stack HCI, what does this really mean? It means now with Azure Stack HCI, you get Azure hybrid capabilities as a native service on-premise. This is a highly available, secure service. And what I mean by highly available, it's a clustered service. It can't be interfered with or tampered with. It's built into the solution. So when you install Azure Stack HCI, you register this to Azure, and this enables you then to project the host services and virtual machine resources into Azure and to manage from the Azure portal. So really kind of bring in this modern Azure capabilities out of the box. And so with that in place, you are able then to deploy virtual machines from Azure, to monitor from Azure, to secure, govern, inventory all your resources in Azure. So essentially, providing that single tool set, that control plane in Azure to your on-premise services. And why is this really important? It means that customers can actually modernize and move to Azure capabilities and cloud capabilities with a cloud-first strategy by providing orchestration and automation, but running virtual machines on-premise in a familiar way, providing cloud in terms of control, cost control, cloud at the customer's speed, and at their pace, and in a familiar way, but also enabling cloud services in a granular fashion. Because what we're doing, we're providing a resource bridge between Azure in public cloud and Azure on-premise, connecting those resource providers together to enable that consistent set of services. So the key message is here, you're able to bring Azure services to on-premise and provide a hybrid cloud solution, but maintain without having to refactor applications to uplift and do any real kind of major changes to your infrastructure. You don't have to modernize to move to cloud. You can move to cloud on-premise in a very simple and easy way. Next slide, please, Phil. So a customer example. So in terms of this customer example, it's further education. Next slide, please, Phil. So in terms of this customer that we're going to be focused on, which is a further education, we focused a lot on refreshing and modernizing their platform, consolidating their SAN architectures into a HCI platform, obtaining 2 to 3 times performance improvements. We were able to get a lot more density from the outcome of modernizing to an HCI platform, while improving security posture and actually enabling cloud on-premise, all to boot out of this whole end-to-end solution approach. Next slide, please, Phil. So in terms of further education, this customer was a cloud-first strategy customer, directionally going to Azure. And we looked at their 40 virtual machines Linux and Windows virtual machines, and what it will take to modernize, refactor them, and prepare them to move to Azure. And we found that, with Azure Stack HCI, we were able to consolidate their existing 5 servers, which were 5 years of age, and to with latest modern processors and this latest HCI platform, to consolidate down to 2 servers from 5. And from the power, cooling, and rack savings, we were able to pay for the solution under a year, which was a major saving and optimization for the customer. But also, we were able to run all their VM workloads, Linux and Windows workloads, on a 2-node system rather than a 5-node system. And with this Azure native service built in, we're able to enable Azure orchestration, automation, security, inventory, and governance from Azure, and outreach that to on-premise, providing a cloud-first outcome without having to wait months or years to modernize the applications or refactor those applications. We just were able to run the virtual machines as they were. It was a migration from the existing platform, 3-tier architecture, to the new HCI. And we were able then to, in a granular way, switch on Azure capable services on premise and pay for those services in a granular fashion, bringing cloud to the customer in a familiar way, and in a granular way, we've given them better cost control. And that really worked out well for the customer. And the last point I want to make on this slide is that this particular customer, we landed on an Azure Enterprise Agreement because this enabled them to have a 15% egress cost savings in Azure alongside the typical hybrid use rights and reserve rights in Azure, to give them the very optimal Azure and Azure on-premise cost savings around the end-to-end licensing model. Next slide, please, Phil. So in terms of the solution we landed with a 2-node Azure Stack HCI or all-flash system. And this allowed us to migrate the existing 40 Linux and Windows VMs to the infrastructure. And with a 2-node solution, provide N+2, the ability to suffer a node failing and a disk failing on the solution and the system to be able to continue to run. This was an important aspect to maintain running those virtual machines on premise, to provide increased performance, increased resiliency, to give a cloud on premise outcome, to deliver on that cloud first strategy, and to enable cloud at the customer's pace in a granular fashion based on the capabilities they want to enable in the time frame they want to enable, and pay for what they needed for when they needed to align with the business. And this really all in allowed us to provide a cost optimized solution for them that really allowed them to deliver cloud first strategy in a quicker time to value than if they were trying to refactor, modernize applications, containerize applications, and try to move to cloud. So over to you, Phil. I think that's the next slide is yours.
It is. Thank you so much indeed. Right. Thank you, Terry. So what Terry's just discussed there is actually the tangible benefits of embracing a cloud-first strategy, about working with that client and actually using the power of integrated on-prem and public cloud. And also notice he was highlighting there that physical cost was driven down by physically requiring less hardware, and again gaining that integrated experience to public cloud. Now, I'm going to finish this session off by kind of drilling into some more details. So we spoke about this earlier. I described it here as on-prem rather than private cloud, but this capability of delivering on-prem, hybrid, and public cloud integrated services. And of course, this is where Acuutech really specialize, and we really, specialize in working with our partners and our customers to deliver this integrated IT platform experience. And I know this slide is a bit of a eye exam, but what you're really seeing here is, think of these as being turnkey business-ready experiences, where working with the Acuutech team, we can empower your organization. I'm going to work on the left-hand side. Some of those on-prem services you see here, or the private cloud services, this integrated Kubernetes managed experience to allow you to drive containers, both Windows and Linux containers. The ability to easily set up complex replicated or DR scenarios. Using Azure Arc, this hybrid connected service, to either look after servers either running on-prem or in third-party clouds, and also using Azure Arc to look after data running on-prem. If you move over to the middle, again, we've got those classic ones: offsite backup, hybrid access to files, and disaster recovery. And over on the right-hand side, again, you'll recognize some really big-ticket items. They're kind of popular today, given we're in the middle of a pandemic still. Remote access to desktops and applications, turnkey Office 365, infrastructure services. And at the bottom, adding in those capabilities are really important for us as part of our IT platforms, delivering multi-tenancy, tracking, auditing, compliance, billing, and then for our partners who are working with the CSP platform, integration with that. And you can see here what Acuutech does is it's bringing that advanced engineering capability and integrating that with business value to empower your organization. And this likely brings me on to what I call the classic call to action. And as Ben opened this session up earlier, we were talking about a free cloud readiness assessment. This is about, working with you and helping you understand where your workloads are today, recognizing which workloads are best placed to go to which location. If you remember, when I opened this session, I talked about it's about a mindset, putting the correct workload in the correct location. It's about working with you to understand how to get your existing operations enabled and working in this new paradigm of integrated hybrid cloud-first world. And it's also helping you understand the cost analysis. What is the most cost-effective solution for organization? You heard Terry talk about that client earlier, where actually they were considering moving these workloads to the public cloud. And actually, after working with Acuutech and following an assessment, it was realized embracing this hybrid strategy and using the Azure Stack HCI operating system, it was more cost effective for them to keep those workloads on-prem with this direct hybrid integration. So what I would say is that, please, reach out to us. There's some contact email addresses above. And of course, there's a wonderful website for you to go to. But I'd say during this event today, please come to our stand. You'll see it in the main foyer, and come chat to our team. We have a wonderful set of colleagues, Terry and I do there today, who can chat to you about what I've spoken about in this session today, and also talk to you about those sorts of assessments. So with that, I'm going to say thank you very much indeed. Ben, do we have any questions?
We do have a few questions.
All yours, Ben.
Perfect. Well, first one for me, I love that presentation because I've not come across Azure Stack HCI before. Is it new to market? Is it brand new solution? Or
that's a really good question. So Microsoft crack marketing team, I think, is half the issue here. So as Terry alluded to, the technologies that make up this product called Azure Stack HCI are in fact their third or technically fourth generation of technology. So they're established technologies. What Microsoft has done is they have rebranded and created a new product set. So it's part of the Azure product family. So established technologies in a new commercial delivery model. I think that's the way to really think about it. Yes, really good question.
I was reading last week actually about Windows Server 2022.
Indeed.
Now in public preview. Are there any benefits to that?
So Server 2022 brings a lot of capabilities, including Azure Arc integration. I think what's important as we think about going forward is that we should think of Azure Stack 8, or let's go back. We should think of Azure, that general term, as the platform, public cloud Azure, Azure Stack HCI. So when we're thinking about infrastructure solutions, either internal or external, we should think about the Azure portfolios of products. And as we go forward, we should think about Windows Server as being the operating system for running those workloads, to provide, say, directory services or security capabilities, or to run inside a virtual machine or as a container, right? And as we go forward, we'll see that divide gradually extending, and that's a really important thing. But there are some wonderful capabilities in Server 2022, including, as we've touched on, Arc, security enhancements and manageability improvements. So yes, that's a really good question.
Perfect. No, that's great. It's great. A question that's on my mind when I was listening to that, and it's a conversation that I have fairly frequently. It seems to always crop up. But there'll be a lot of IT leaders out there with masses of legacy applications and thinking, obviously they struggle to upgrade or re-architect them because it's so expensive. What kind of advice would you give to leaders out there when it comes to the legacy application side of things?
I think there's two parts to this, and it really falls into a couple of things. So let's take it from what I call the platform capability one. One of the advantages, first of all, from Azure Stack HCI is it's running Hyper-V, a world-renowned hypervisor. So you have that broad support for a wide range of Linux and Windows OSs. So it becomes a great home for running those older applications. However, as we also know, there are applications that are so old that they're not going to run inside of a modern operating system. And that's where platforms like Drupal or some of the other wrapper technologies, but Drupal is a key one, of course, makes it easier for those organizations to take those legacy applications and package them in a format that then allows them to run on supported operating systems, because we all know anything pre-Server 2008 now is end of life from a Microsoft point of view. So we've got to get those applications running in those modern OSs. So yes, hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, good coverage there. Two questions I'm going to quickly pose before we wrap up the session. Coming from the audience, it looks as though it's proved pretty popular, the talk, but one's asking, are pay-as-you-go licensing models available?
So there's two parts here, and I'll let Terry pick on this. So Azure Stack HCI SKU is a consumption-based licensing model, right? And it's based on the number of physical cores inside the infrastructure, right? Terry, do you want to briefly talk about some of the other pay-as-you-go parts that fit into the wider Arc portfolio and some of the on-prem stuff briefly?
Sure. So if you imagine you've got Azure Stack HCI, Azure Stack HCI is $10 per core per month for the core operating system, so that you get the storage, you get the compute, you get the software-defined networking, and then you have a workload license, and that's typically a Windows 2019 data center license, and you register that to each node in the cluster, and that allows you to give you unlimited VMs within as running workloads within there. That's unlimited containers, unlimited VMs, and so there's two aspects to the licensing model. And then you have Azure Arc. Azure Arc capabilities gives you that resource bridge, that connection for Azure resources on premise, and you can then light up capabilities. So think about when you use Azure Arc to enable Azure services on premise, for the services that you pay in Azure, you would pay the same on top of Azure Arc. Think of it in that way. Okay, so Azure Arc is the bridge. It connects you on-premise to Azure, and then as you enable Azure Monitor, Azure Policy, Azure Patch Management, if you have to pay for the service in Azure, you would pay for the services on-premise.
Thanks, Terry. Good. And probably picking up again on Sarah's point earlier when they were talking about the, obviously the costs, the risk side of things in terms of signing up for certain packages, but are there any risks of commitment of licensing for 3 years or 5 years up front?
So the way to think about this is as follows. Azure Stack HCI and the services, for example, Terry's touched on some of them, say the monitoring service, or let's talk about, say, the Kubernetes service or the database services that we've spoken about. They are all Azure products, and therefore the type of contract and discount models that are available in Azure are available to them. Right, that's the way to think about it. As we move forward, we should stop thinking Windows Server and start think Azure consumption and the Azure world of billing. If that makes sense from that point of view. Yep.
Perfect. Well, listen, thank you so much for being with us, guys. Love that presentation. I'm off to do my my research, having not previously heard about certain elements of your presentation. As a reminder for the audience that anyone that maybe joined us slightly later on, the presentation will be on demand within the next 4 hours for a 7-day period. And again, you can go and speak to the Acuutech team at their booth in the virtual exhibition hall. Based on, and there's a few more questions coming through to me just now. I'll relay them to you guys offline. But please do go and have a chat with Acuutech and MSS. But for now, Phil and Terry, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
So that concludes session 2. Please stick around with us, grab a spot of lunch, and we will see everyone for session 3 with some more fantastic presentations coming up in the afternoon. Thanks very much.